So we're talking Rugby World Cup semi-finals with Mark again here. Welcome back, Mark.
Yes, man. Good to be back.
So Argentina versus New Zealand. First up, what are your initial thoughts?
I'm a little worried. Like, I don't think in camp they will have this mentality, but there's a bit of a mentality that it's basically a foregone conclusion that we're definitely gonna just, ease through to a final up against the Springboks.
Yeah. Almost like you should be preparing for the final.
I don't think that's not the mentality you can have going into a World Cup semi-final. No. Argentina's they're a good team, man. Like, I mean, they may not be. For a while, it's been we all met in the AB quarterfinals that have seemed like a cut above everyone else, but yeah, you can't be counting any chickens. They're going to just throw everything at it. It may not be enough, but yeah, it's certainly a game that you can't be complacent about.
Yeah, true. So just on Argentina as well, like the progress they made this year, Rugby Championship they started out, and New Zealand just took them apart in that opening game, but they've improved through the rest of the Rugby Championship and then into the World Cup as well. So how do you think they've progressed?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because Argentina is one of many teams who had the old coaching change when Ledesma stepped down and Michael Cheika was taken over. And he talked a lot about wanting to kind of get back to the fundamentals. So he was focusing on getting the set piece right. He wants to get their ruck and maul stuff right. So it seems like one of the areas that's been a little bit neglected has been their attacking play. Like, they've been a pretty quiet side offensively. True. And it's not like they don't have some gun players. Like Mateo Carreras is an insane attacking weapon. We've seen what he can do in the Premiership and a little bit of what he can do at test level. Boffelli's a great player. Malia and Imhoff, like, they've got a huge amount of just attacking weapon players, but we haven't really seen it. Like, they scored 2 tries against us when it was a bit of a lopsided. They did score 4 against Australia in that Rugby Championship game where they managed to kind of pull that one out of the fire. 2 against South Africa, then 1 against South Africa, 1 against England, 1 against Samoa. They didn't look like a team which was going to score. I mean, they played Spain and put them to the sword. They played Chile and put them to the sword. 1 pre-World Cup. But end game, which was only the last game before the quarterfinals, they looked to me like maybe they're just coming right at the right time. Like, if there's a time to finally click, it's got to be now. I mean, they scored 5 tries against Japan. So, yeah, that element of the game finally seems to be coming right. And that just seemed to be that kind of one missing element. But if it's right now, perfect timing.
Yeah, exactly. The time to run so well from, not being able to beat England against 14 for pretty much the entire game and then coming through. But something I noticed as well is you talked about the back play, is that they don't have a settled midfield. They keep chopping and changing their centre partnership. Every game it's maybe one is retained, but it's somebody's injured or they're rotating or wherever. And that's gonna be difficult if you're trying to find form in the backs as well.
Yeah, I don't think Cheika's quite made his mind up. I think he prefers Chocobares, but Chocobares spent, I think, a lot of last year away injured, so he never really got that chance to establish himself as kind of the first choice guy. And then he's got like the veterans like De La Fuente and like Loroni, who have been guys for a long time, but he seems to kind of be in two minds as to whether, to keep going with the veterans, maybe don't quite have. They got some good playmaking punch, but they don't have like a Ma'anono or a Manu Tuilangi or a Bandiaki, like a direct runner, which some of the other teams. So I think you're right. I don't think he's quite made his mind up yet, but I do think, if they can keep Chocobares in the team, he could be one that's kind of cements that spot in the midfield anyway.
I think Chocobares and Cinti look good as well when those two were together. But they only played like 1 or 2 games together as a combination this year. And then like Moroni's been in and out of the team as well.
Yeah, I was never that big a fan of Cinti for a long time. I thought he looked distinctly average in virtually every game I saw him play, but he kind of, like the team itself, actually seems to be coming right. And maybe it is just that game time. Maybe he just more time in the 13 jersey just to really kind of establish himself.
True. So we talked about Argentina. Let's talk about New Zealand. So you said, you think they're going to be focused on this game here, but of the New Zealand players so far in the tournament, like who's impressed you the most?
I mean, it's hard to go past Adi Savia. He's been, like, if you're talking about players, and it's one thing about this All Black squad that they've been kind of criticised for, it's like, if you were to name a World 15 prior to this World Cup, how many of the All Blacks guys would you be seriously considering?
True.
Like the props, you're not putting any of those All Blacks props into a World 15. The likes of Whitelock and Retallick argument that they're kind of getting a bit too long in the tooth. People said, Sam 7 in New Zealand, and yet somehow he's the captain. Savi is the one guy that you'd be like, right, he may not be everyone's first choice, but he's definitely in the conversation for one of the
absolutely
in the world. And I think he's kept up with that kind of, he's lived up to that reputation at the World Cup. Like, his carries and scoring tries and winning turnovers and making tackles is great. Sam Cane, I think, has proved a few doubters wrong. It helps when you're winning. He's been criticised a lot by New Zealand fans. I do think part of that criticism comes for two reasons. One, he gets compared to McCaw, which is an impossible standard to live up to.
It's a huge shadow to be
under.
under.
Because he plays at number 7 and they've moved Javier to 8 to accommodate Kane at 7, he gets compared to Savia as well. And they're really different players. Kane is like that crazy post-contact meters, offloading and crazy dummy. He's a real industrial player. He just makes a ton of tackles. He clears out a heap of rucks. And he is really good at what he does. More times often than not, he's New Zealand's top tackler.
Yeah. He reminds me of
but he's
James
not doing
Ryan.
the flashy offloading stuff people like. So he gets kind of compared unfavorably to Adi Savia. But like I said, it's not really a fair comparison because they're not the same player.
Yeah, and
they're very different styles.
Seve is one of those like generational players. He's on the same level as Dupont or Etzebeth that, they're always every year in the conversation for at least the best player in the position, if not the best player in the world. And, I've never seen Seve have a poor game, let alone a bad game. He's always like 7 out of 10, and most of the time he's better than that as well, and it's really hard if you're getting compared to him, you're on a hiding to nothing really.
Yeah, I mean every team seems to have a player like that. Like Franco Mostert plays for the Springboks, and he's another one. He's a tackling machine, but he gets compared to Arceus Neyman, who just loves these crazy offloads. Totally different players. Yeah. They've got different roles, but Mostert kind of gets compared unfavorably. So you could probably name examples from every single team like that. But
true.
It's just unfortunate for Kane that he's the captain, so he gets that spotlight on him. But I do think he's played. Like in terms of the New Zealand rugby public, their opinion of him is probably a little bit better. The fact that we just won a quarterfinal, we're still alive in the World Cup. A number of people kind of expected us to potentially go out. That opinion is higher. But if we lose to Argentina,
it'll flip back.
Worst All Blacks captain ever, and worst All Blacks coach ever in Ian Foster. So people are pretty fickle. Like you're only kind of as good as your last game.
True. Someone who stood out for me as well for New Zealand this World Cup is Aaron Smith, because there was a huge fight for that number 9 jersey, and then he just almost reinvented himself and came back to the top of the pile again. Really impressive. Yeah,
Cam, the kind of sexy pick for a lot of New Zealand fans right now. He had a cracking Super Rugby season and was just on an absolute crazy try, which is not something Aaron Smith's usually known for. He's like just an exquisite passer of the ball and puts those huge passes in, so kind of pinpoint accurate, which again, not quite as sexy as scoring tries. And he's the old fellow, this is the young guy. But no, the coaches have stayed pretty loyal to him, and I think he's repaid them. Like, we had the same debates back in 2015 that Dan Carter is too old, he's past it. They need to play Bowden Barrett. Richie McCaw's too old, and he's past it. So, I mean, there's something to be said for that experience, eh?
True. And just on Argentina, what player from them would you say has stood out for you in the tournament?
Marcos Kremer. I know he's a bit of a divisive figure just because he is he's known to have a little bit of the old kind of red mist, and when that descends, he can get himself into a bit of trouble. But he's been a proper workhorse. I like Gajo, the loose head prop, just because he does do sexy stuff, which is not as he's not necessarily just a prop who just scrummages. He likes to break tackles and whatnot. Obviously, Matera is going to be a big loss for them, but like at the weekend, I thought Facundo Issa played pretty well at number 8. He
was decent. Yeah,
I kind of like the back row dynamic more when Issa is there because he's like a genuine big ball carrying number 8. Like when they play this to number 8, and he's a really nimble runner, but he's not like that big threat from the back of the scrum that you like with an Issa.
Yeah, Kramer was the one I had as the guy who's really stood out for me. Like, he does. He reminds me a little bit of Peter O'Mahony. He's got a bit of dog about him, and he's up for a fight every time. But he's just playing so well, and when a player like that plays well, it just goes your way. And the other thing I'm surprised about is that Lavanini hasn't got himself sent off yet. I know he hasn't played every game, but still, it must be a record for him to go that many games without a red card.
Yeah, he did almost get involved in afters in that game against Wales, where Josh Adams put in a wee kind of late shoulder or something, and Lavanini kind of got a bit of the jersey grabbing, and then I think Carl Dixon's first reaction was, "Wait, blue 5?" Like he's just. He's got to watch his P's and Q's, that guy, because anything he does is under such a spotlight. So it's hard. It's hard to control that when the red mist descends. But if he can keep himself, he's a big unit of a man. Like he's a great player with that kind of one glaring weakness about him. If he can keep that clean, they'll be in with a better chance against New Zealand for sure.
True. So talking about chances, last question on this semi-final: who do you think is going to win?
I mean, New Zealand should win it. We beat Argentina more often than not. We got it in us to score a few tries. Like I said, Argentina hasn't been scoring a heck of a lot else. We should win it. Yeah. Would I be surprised if Argentina win it? Yes, but would I be absolutely shocked? No. Argentina have got it in them to win that game for sure. It's not a foregone conclusion, but you feel like Argentina will need to play really well. They can't make many mistakes if they're going to win that one.
Argentina at times, they remind me of kind of Ireland around the era when we had the likes of Keith Wood in our team, in that a lot of their performance comes from emotion and reaction, and they kind of find it hard to put back-to-back good performances together because of that. We've seen them through this year as well, up and down. So it's almost going to be whether they can get themselves up and get a good start, I think, in that one. But for me, I think New Zealand are definitely going to win that. On to then, so second semi-final, England versus the Springboks. So what are your initial thoughts on this one?
I mean, it's got a very similar vibe, doesn't it? And that it's the kind of the big time favorite up against the big time underdog. But I think England just quietly, I know people all say they kind of haven't been tested in terms of the teams they've had to play, but they've been playing pretty solid rugby. They're not a team that concedes a lot of tries. And often you think about, successful World Cup teams, you usually build it on the back of a good defence and hopefully a pretty accurate goal kicker. So England have certainly got a bit of that about them. Maybe they're coming right, just like we've seen with Wales prior to their exit. Like they seem to be coming right after a less than stellar 2023. Same with Argentina. So England are going to be big time underdogs. But again, I don't think they're a team that you can just write off as not a chance.
Yeah, true. But what do you think of Borthwick's selection policy with England? I can't figure out where he's going with his teams from one week to the next, really.
Yeah, he's a bit all over the shop, and he's hard to read because he doesn't really answer questions very directly in press conferences. Like Andy Farrell, he's not going to make a good politician because for Ireland, he answers them straight down the barrel.
Yeah.
Whereas Steve Borthwick likes to talk around topics and very rarely gives you kind of insights into what his thinking is. Like, I mean, he did actually question about kind of midfield selection in that game against Fiji, going with Tuilangi and Marchant instead of going forward and Farrell like 10-12, playing. He basically just said like, I want the power to match the Fijian power, and I think Marchant can link up with the outside backs. And I was like, oh my god, he's given some insights into what is what he's actually thinking. So that was kind of pleasing. Although it is it's a tough one to keep George Ford on the bench because I think he's probably I mean, Farrell had a good game, but I think George Ford is probably
I'd agree with that.
A better 10. It's one of those ones where he's the captain, so he has to play. So if you play him at 12 to accommodate George Ford, then you're losing that bit of kind of direct running that you get from having Tuilangi at 12. So I guess it depends on who you want to play. It's like the All Blacks kind of have the same thing with like, do you play Beauden Barrett at 15 to kind of get that extra playmaker, or do you play like an out and out fullback like Will Jordan kind of thing? So he's a little bit all over the shop with his selections. Like I think he's kind of gotten a bit lucky in that like Alex Mitchell's now their kind of starting 9, but he's only the starting 9 because they had injuries to like Van Poortvliet prior to the World Cup.
So like he wasn't even in the squad until Van Poortvliet got injured.
Yeah,
and then he leapfrogs the other two like to be starting 9 is crazy.
Yeah, so it's kind of like an accidental bit of good selection. So I mean, I guess it doesn't matter how it happens, but. Yeah, Marcus Smith at 15 is also an interesting one because do you play Freddie Stewart? I get why they didn't play Freddie Stewart against Fiji because they probably think Fiji's not going to kick them. Yeah, Fiji aren't going to kick them a lot of high balls. And like I like the idea of Freddie Stewart on the wing because you can kick him high balls and he's going to beat a lot of people in the air. But like the Fijian wingers have got some of the best steps in the game. And Freddie Stewart, when he turns, he looks like
he's like an oil tanker.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I can see why they didn't want to kind of match him up with some of the Fijians. It was a big call because Freddie Stewart's been a real mainstay of the Steve Borthwick squad.
So another weird selection for me is Billy Vunipola. I honestly don't see what he offers England at this point in his career. I can see like Tuilagi coming back, he's actually had impact, but Vunipola, like he seems like a bit of a busted flush. Everybody knows you hit him before you can get any steam up, and then he's after that he's not going to make any meters after contact. What do you think of him?
Yeah, he seems like an odd call, like especially if you're not going to start him. I mean, Ben Earl's been doing phenomenally well in this tournament, so with the form that Ben Earl's in, I kind of think you put Billy V out of a job. I would have thought. I'm pretty sure Ludlam was still fit, and he's a real workhorse player, and he can grow. So, I mean, maybe Borthwick's looking for that kind of impact punch off the bench, but I think he played like 6 minutes against Fiji and like got I think 1 or 2 carries and didn't really get very far. So I don't know. His
and they were all his own 22 as well.
Yeah, he doesn't really. He only really covers number 8, so he seems like an odd guy to have on the bench. I mean, New Zealand do the same thing when they pick Caleb Clark as their like 20 and the 23 jumper. It's like, well, he's pretty much only covers the left wing, and he's a pretty one-dimensional player as well. So it just seems like an odd one to pick that kind of player. Like when a lot of the coaches go down they want that double trades player to fill that kind of that bench position.
Yeah. And some players end up on the bench rather than the starting team because they have, that ability to cover so many positions as well. Then we asked you about Argentina and New Zealand. So England, who's impressed you so far in the tournament?
I have actually liked Joe Marchant this time. I know they kind of they haven't really settled on kind of what's his best position, but I do think he adds a bit of zip. And England's another one that kind of hasn't looked that flash, like Argentina, like on attack. They've not looked like a team which is going to score that many tries, but he's looked like a bit of a weapon. Obviously, George Ford at the start, 10 looked very, very comfortable. Those guys look good. I mentioned Alex Mitchell. I think his selection's kind of been a bit of a fortuitous one. So, I do think they got the players. I think they'll probably play Freddie Stewart against South Africa because I guess they can expect some, based on what we saw against the French, we can expect some kind of high ball.
You wouldn't want Marcus Smith under those.
Probably not. Yeah. Maybe Marcus Smith up to the bench.
Yeah, for me, the standouts have been Ford. His game management is just excellent. He guides the team around the pitch, and you feel like he knows how to dig out a win as well from adversity. And then, as you mentioned him before, Earl as well. I think he's been excellent in that back row.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. And how about then for the Springboks?
Yeah, a big time favourites for that one. I mean, they've shown that they've got multiple ways to beat you. I mean, I think you mentioned, was either this video or the last one, how the Springboks have kind of got it in them to win games in multiple ways. Sometimes you think they're a really direct running team and they're not going to kick that much ball, but we saw against the French, they put a lot of high balls in. They're not just a team which scores more tries, but they've got it in them to score more tries if they want to, but they've also got lightning quick backs who in the last kind of 12, 18 months have been getting a lot more, like compared to that team that played the British and Irish Lions during COVID times. The team's kind of evolved quite a lot to be a lot more like, just really dangerous in the back. So the All Blacks, man, big time favourites.
Yeah, true. And who stood out for you for them in the tournament?
I mean, Cheslin Colby. Nobody could dislike Cheslin Colby.
No.
His ability to break a tackle, his commitment to just chase everything. He's kicked goals at points in this year. He went for a drop goal in that game against France. He charges down a conversion. He tackles guys who are like twice his size. He is just the epitome of like anyone can play rugby. Khaleesi's led fantastically well from the front. He generally got him pretty early because he goes hammer and tongs for as long as they're going to play him for. Yeah, he just empties the tank, like you say. He clears rucks all day. Like there's phases where he'll clear the ruck and then he gets up and does the next one. Like he does them back to back to back. Also, Peter Steff, I think there was a little bit of a question mark about how was his form. Is he the best guy, in this Springboks unit for that kind of blindside role? But I think he's recaptured a bit of his form from.
I think part of that was the level he was playing at. He wasn't up to the fitness of Test rugby, and through the tournament he played himself. Vermeulen kind of similar because he was injured for most of the season with Ulster as well, and now those two really come on. I felt.
Yeah. Playing yourself into a bit of form across the tournament sometimes just does happen. You need those games and that time together in camp.
And you mentioned Khaleesi, like the fact that he had that injury earlier on in the year, which a normal human being would take at least a year to come back from. He's back in a couple of months. He's plays the rugby championship, and he's like emptying the tank there in a quarter final like that as well. It was one thing, though, a point that stood out for me in that game was there was the ball, France were attacking, they were a few meters out from the Springboks line, and the ball is there on the ground. Khaleesi picks it up, and then Dupont comes in, and the two of them are wrestling for the ball. That was just like the two titans going at it for the ball there. It was crazy.
Yeah, exactly. The battle of the captains, Yeah, now him and Gelant had to overcome crazy injuries. There was a lot of talk about Dupont and his face going into that quarterfinal. But the medical technology these days, and this, like you say, the DNA of those players or whatever recovery programs they go through. I'm sure it's a lot of work in the background that we don't see to get themselves back fit. Incredible.
So, last couple of questions. So, first of all, for both teams, who would you start at 10 for this semi-final?
That's a tough question. Missing a midfield. Do I want Damien Delende running up against Owen Farrell, or do I want him running up against Mana Tuilangi? Probably Tuilangi in the midfield, which we've got to go Farrell at 10 because Farrell's not going to be on the bench. So despite the fact that I think George Ford is the better 10, I think it'll be Farrell. And for the box, I mean, Marnie Libok's been playing pretty well.
Yeah.
But do they go the slightly more conservative approach and go for Pollard? It wouldn't surprise me to see them go Pollard. I like Marnie's ability to kind of, he puts up those high bombs and he's got a real eye to set up the players around him. I think maybe a bit more than Pollard, but I can see the Springboks going slightly more conservative and potentially going Pollard.
Possible as well. And just the thing as well, if Farrell is starting, who do you put on the bench then? Do you make a Marcus Smith for that kind of Hail Mary, or do you put Ford on the bench?
Oh man, I mean, if you're talking about the versatility and if you need someone to kind of, if they're chasing the game and they need someone to help unlock the Springboks defense from fullback, if you kind of wanted to move Stewart around to the wing or something, then maybe you go with Marcus Smith, because I do think he's shown that ability to unlock defenses a bit better. I mean, Ford from 10 for sure, but at fullback, if they do have that kind of tandem playmakers thing going on, I think that could work pretty well.
Yeah, true. And then final question on this one, same as the last one, who do you think is going to win?
I mean, probably.
Yeah.
Me really wants to see the All Blacks against the Springboks in that final game.
Yeah.
I know for a lot of the neutrals, that's not their favourite fixture because like both these teams have won the World Cup multiple times, so it's not exactly going to be something exciting to see these two big teams go at it again. But I mean, that would be a hell of a game to see those teams go at it. But again, like the All Blacks against the Pumas, the Springboks can't take the English lightly. All it's going to take is, Owen Farrell to start ticking the scoreboard over, and games can easily get away from you. So, yeah, on paper, both those games should be pretty comfortable wins, but that's why they play the games, right? That's why it's not all done on paper, because you never know.
Yeah, as you say, like it looks like, given what's happened in the tournament before, it should be comfortable wins for New Zealand and South Africa, but it's a semi-final and players can find that little bit extra that you haven't seen them produce all year, and suddenly they're in with a shot for it. And once you're in with a shot, like it doesn't matter whether it's a fortuitous try that wins it for you or a scrappy drop goal or wherever. If you win and you're the underdog, you're still in the final. So
Ardie Savea could get a first-minute red card for the All Blacks, and suddenly they're playing the man down, their best players off the field. Anything could happen like that. So
true.
And we just hope, please no big injuries, please no cards, just let them be kind of good games of rugby, basically.
Very true. Yeah. Let's hope for 2 more exciting games. We've been spoiled, I think, already with what we've seen so far, but you just gotta keep going back for more. Exciting semi-finals and exciting final hopefully to come. But thanks for joining me again today, Mark. Really appreciate it.
No, man, it's a pleasure. Always good to chat.